Okay, to pick up where we left off, here in the last sentence of this page, the what you do need to know about these editing techniques is abrupt zooms means, going in close up on to an object. And so we've been accustomed to this idea of our attention will be focused visually, in a way that used to be achieved through verbal or alphabetical means. And so the zooms help us to figure out what it is we're supposed to be focusing on. Elliptical editing is actually kind of interesting because what elliptical editing is when time is purposely taken out of scenes in a way that's disorienting to the viewer. And so it's something that's supposed to kind of communicate to the viewer that the character or the object that's under scrutiny is, experiencing sort of a surreal moment. No storylines, that's pretty self-explanatory that there's not much plot. And then flash cuts are is a sequence of short cuts where each shot lasts 3 seconds or less. And so basically what that is supposed to symbolize is sort of a lack of attention span in the modern day viewer. And if you want to test that, just watch an old movie where there are not a lot of flash cuts. And there are these very long shots of an uninterrupted video or film at the time period. And we find it almost aggravating or frustrating today because we're so accustomed to flash cutting in our commercials and in our movies and our TV shows and our videos and everything that we watch. Now, here on the next page in the book, or the next couple of pages in the book, I think we'll find a quotation that will specifically speak to those of us here in the Southeast who live in an area where there are hurricanes and our goods are threatened at times in the fall season when hurricane season is going on. You'll see here a quotation that says, "The motion picture industry has provided a window on the world, and the colonized nations have looked through that window and have seen the things of which they have been deprived. It is perhaps not generally realized that a refrigerator can be a revolutionary symbol to a people who have no refrigerators. A motor car owned by a worker in one country can be a symbol of revolt to a people deprived of even the necessities of life. Hollywood helped to build up the sense of deprivation of man's birthright, and that sense of deprivation has played a large part in the national revolutions of post-war Asia." Now, Sukarno is speaking to a very specific kind of revolution that was going on at that time, but I think we can all empathize with what's being said here, that television is a propaganda machine of what life should look like. And when we feel a gap between our own lived experience and what we're shown on the screen, that we feel like we've been cheated somehow and that we need to fight in order to get what is our right, when really the refrigerators, the cars, etc., are not really anyone's right, but we've been taught to believe they are based on this myth of reality that we are shown on the screen. Okay, so here we come to question number 3. Toward the end of the book, 132 through 154, McLuhan communicates what he thinks we should recognize and do after reading his theories. Who or what do you think McLuhan believes we are fighting? What do you think McLuhan proposes we should use or do to exploit technology's powers to create change? Support your choice with a quotation from McLuhan's text as well as a 2 to 3 sentence explanation of why you chose it. So here we come to this 2-page spread of a capital A we have 2 people standing over here with something that we don't know what it is. But we find out on the next page, it says art is anything. And, here we have a figure of, it looks like a paper mache statue of some sort with men reading newspapers filing into the groin of that person. And then the words, "you can get away with." So art is anything you can get away with. So it's pretty obvious that what McLuhan sees as being the antidote to the influence of literature and politics and government and commercialism through technology is art. And he says, the establishment pays homage to 4 anti-environmental lads. British Prime Minister Wilson visits the Cavern Club in Liverpool, where the Beatles got their start. The museum has become a storehouse of human values, a cultural blood bank. And, obviously he's saying that the Beatles, again, this is a reference to a musical act that was popular during the time, is an antidote to the establishment, to the government, in other words. So he goes on to say that the Cavern Club, which is, literally a music club, has become a museum, a storehouse of human values, a cultural blood bank. So the music is like the lifeline, to our culture, that when you rail against the establishment, that's a way of remaining living. So McLuhan's revolutionary ideals go on, page 142, where he states, the environment as a processor of information is propaganda. Propaganda ends where dialogue begins. You must talk to the media, not to the programmer. So, in other words, he's saying we have to keep talking. We have to actually engage with and be critical of and not just consume the media that surrounds us. And specifically, he says, he's saying don't just become one of the willing masses. Here you see this illustrated by the cartoon. It says, see Dick, protest, Dick, protest. And obviously this is a play on the popular Dick and Jane books, where it's like see Dick run, see Dick, or see Jane run, see Spot run. And instead of just them running and playing, these young protagonists are protesting. So it's a call to the youth to be critical of what they're being fed by the establishment, to break out of the propaganda that says you shall want forever, and instead say, I shall think, I shall see, I shall believe in something beyond just commercialist desires that are shown in our movies. In a lot of ways, what he wants us to do basically is to not become, slaves or addicted to our technology. Here we see the cover of the New York Times, where it says power failure snarls northeast. 800,000 are caught in subways here, autos tied up, city gropes in the dark. And so, again, being here in the Southeast in a place where we're, held hostage by hurricanes at times, we know what this means. Like we're like, oh, we love the internet, we love our electricity, we love our phones, we love our movies, blah, blah, blah. And then when all of those things are taken away from us suddenly, we find ourselves to be very much so at their mercy, and unable to communicate, unable to operate, unable to, be in control of our own environments. And so he's asking us to reflect on that, to think about how we've made trade-offs in the scale, pace, and pattern of our lives. In a lot of ways, we're very laudatory of them, that we say, oh, it's so fantastic that we have electricity so that we can do more things. But then when the electricity is taken away from us, we find that we can't do anything, that we don't have skills to, 1, put it back together, or 2, to exist without it, And I want you to think about that very deeply, and think about it in relation to your own life. Not only the benefits that we gain from various technologies in our lives, but also the way in which we become addicted to them and enslaved to them, and weakened by them, because we don't have some skills to operate on our own. And we finally come to the image that is spread over pages 156 through 157 here in question 4. And I've asked you, how do you see the summary of McLuhan's text working today in the 21st century? In other words, if you were explaining McLuhan to a friend, how would you make him or her understand the significance of McLuhan's theories today? And if we go and look at that page, we see a young person with a guitar, a symbol of the youth and the revolt in the 1960s when McLuhan was writing, talking to his father, who was sitting there in a 3-piece suit, a symbol of the establishment inside of a library, which of course is also the symbol of centuries worth of establishment, the printed word. And the young man is saying to his dad, you see, Dad, Professor McLuhan says the environment that man creates becomes his medium for defining his role in it. The invention of type created linear or sequential thought, separating thought from action. Now with TV and folk singing, thought and action are closer and social involvement is greater. We again live in a village. Get it? And I think we could easily see how, and I'm sure probably so many of you have experienced this, you could have the same conversation with your parents today talking about the role of the internet and perhaps hip hop music. Again, crossing barriers, breaking down boundaries, saying we live in a village. We're a post-racial world. We're a post-class world. Some of this is hyperbole and some of it is very much so rooted in fact. And that's what I wanted you all to think about in your responses to this question, to see how you could see McLuhan's theory and maybe the role of art in fighting propaganda and fighting for new ways of thinking, working today in your life. So I'm very interested to see what kinds of answers you came up with when you submitted your worksheets. I, for one, would probably take a look at the internet and say how much it has enabled me to learn about cultures or different places, to be able to experiment with food that I otherwise wouldn't be able to, based on being able to share information with people that I don't know and have never met and will never see. Also, it's lovely in the way that I can get access to this information very quickly. One thing that's really unfortunate about it is that a lot of people are giving away their information for free on the internet. There are special, for me, I keep thinking about cooking because I cook a lot, and I use a lot of people's recipes without paying them for it, because I get that information for free. And simultaneously, though, even though I'm not paying the small business owner or person who is trying to start a small business online, maybe to supplement their income, I'm monthly giving away a lot of money to mega corporations so that I can steal the little person's recipes. It's a very specific example, but just think about it. I spend $80, I guess, a month on my phone bill. And also I spent another $40 a month on my Wi-Fi. I spent several $100s on a phone. I had to then, spend some more money to get cases to carry that phone around with. Also, my employer spent a certain amount of money to get me a computer so I could use it. I had to buy a printer so I could also, take advantage of this. Then I had to buy toner cartridges for that. I also have to continually pay my electricity bill so that I can gain access to this. So the big corporations are making a ton of money off of this, while very typically the little person is being starved out, and I'm complicit in this process, which makes me feel very guilty. Also, in exchange for this ease of my life, I am also contributing to my carbon footprint, and, not helping with the pollution issues that are going on in our world today. Also with the excess creation of trash, things that don't break down, they don't biodegrade easily. And so, yes, we live in a village where we have access to a lot of information. But on the other hand, the change that these technologies have made to the scale, pace, and pattern of my life also have some very bad effects on it. So, what should I do to protest this? I could make biodegradable art. I don't know. There's some interesting ways that we could think about what you can do to protest the way that the literature, the mimetic art of our time that's being produced and disseminated over the internet and through our TVs has made us covet items in a way of life that is not necessarily good for other people. So I really do hope that you did think about both the positives and the negatives in your example, that when you're using it to explain to your friend whatever specific example that you did choose. And I'm just going to restate, I'm going to be very interested to read what you wrote in your worksheets for this week, and I wish you good luck with the quiz.